I never thought I'd walk into a boardroom and make a grown man drop his Mont Blanc pen. But there I was. Awkward heels, too tight blazer I borrowed from my cousin, and nerves shaking inside me like a soda can on a roller coaster, watching my stepdad's face contort like he just swallowed glass. They had no idea I was even invited to the will reading. "Let her sit," my grandfather said calmly. His voice still had that crisp, commanding edge like the snap of an old leather belt. I hadn't seen him in months. Years, really. We weren't close. He always preferred polished people. Wall Street sons, shiny daughters-in-law. Not the quiet step-grandkid who sketched out business plans on napkins and never made eye contact during family dinners. I kept my head down as I slid into the seat furthest from him. My mother was on my stepdad's right, her brows drawn tight, eyes flicking from the mahogany table to the stack of documents like she was already estimating her slice of the pie. My grandfather cleared his throat. "I'll be brief," he began. "No long preambles, no poetic legacies. I built this company from sweat, spit, and gut instinct. It deserves to be run by someone who understands what that means." That's when he said my name. He didn't stutter, didn't hesitate, just laid it out. I was inheriting the company, not my stepdad, Wigla, not my half-brother, not the polished heirs in tailored suits. Me. The room went dead. I looked up slowly, trying to catch my mother's reaction. Her eyes were wide, not in pride, but confusion. As if someone had written the wrong name on the will, as if I didn't belong in the sentence CEO and legacy and granddaughter in the same breath. "Wait, this has to be a mistake," my stepdad barked. "You said you were appointing someone who understood the business. She's a nobody." And that's when my grandfather leaned in, looked straight at me, and gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Not warm, not fatherly, strategic. He said, quietly but enough for everyone at the table to hear, "Let him think he's winning. Let him take it. Trust me." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But I nodded. And that was the moment my life split in two. Outside the boardroom I could barely breathe. My phone buzzed with messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. My stepdad stormed past me like I was invisible. And my mother, well, she walked right behind him, as if she hadn't just watched her only child be handed a $120 million company. Maybe she didn't know how to react. Maybe she was calculating the political fallout, but I stood there, staring at my reflection in the mirrored elevator wall, and whispered one thing to myself: "Don't mess this up." What no one in that room knew, what even I had barely allowed myself to believe, was that I did have a vision. I had been studying. Not in business school, not with consultants, but in silence. Watching, reading, learning, building things online that no one noticed. Platforms, communities, quiet wins, no press releases. I wasn't ready, but I was prepared. And deep down I knew, if Grandpa gave me this not out of love, but strategy, then I needed to play the game like he did. Because my stepdad wasn't going to walk away quietly. And this company, this legacy, was about to become the battlefield none of us saw coming. If you've ever been the person no one bet on, the one left off the invitation list only to walk in and change the whole room, drop a comment. I want to hear your story too. 828 words. Tiptuk go tiptuk devichentu. Chung tu. The man my mother married. My mother used to say that marrying Gerald saved her life. To be fair, I don't know what life she thought she was being saved from. My biological father left when I was 6, yes, but I don't remember abuse or violence, just distance. Quiet. A man who looked through me like I was part of the wallpaper. And then came Gerald. Tailored suits, booming laugh, handshake that lingered too long on men's shoulders and too firm on mine. The kind of man who smelled like power and cologne. When they got married, I became a footnote. My mom, always image-conscious, quickly folded me into her new life like an inconvenient clause in a contract. Gerald didn't want kids, so I was already grown. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, helpful, but forgettable. He never hit me, never yelled, but he undermined me in that slow, syrupy way that confident men do when they know they're untouchable. "You're sweet, kid," he'd say after glancing at my sketches. "But no one gets rich designing ideas on paper. Leave business to the people who understand risk." He called me kid well into my 20s. By then, Gerald had become more than just my mother's husband. He was the right hand to my grandfather. Everyone said he was the natural successor. charismatic, connected, with a resume that read like an Ivy League brochure. I watched him schmooze his way through the corporate ranks like the company was always meant to be his. And honestly, I let him have it. For years. Because what would I have done with a billion-dollar conglomerate? I was the one building crowdfunding campaigns for indie inventors, tutoring teens in underfunded schools, doodling future tech on diner napkins. I didn't want to sit at oak tables with men who spoke in spreadsheets. Until Grandpa gave it to me. And Gerald smiled. Not the how dare you kind of fury I expected, not even the I'll fight this in court kind of outrage, just a smile. "I'll help you," he said later that night, after the boardroom bombshell. "You'll need a mentor. Someone who knows how to steer a ship like this." I should have known. In the weeks that followed, I became CEO in name only. Gerald introduced me to every department head as our transitional figurehead. Every question I asked in meetings was gently redirected. Every concern I raised about financial reports was met with condescending pats on the shoulder. My mother, meanwhile, was too busy planning a family retreat in the Caymans to notice I was being erased. Strategically, methodically, politely. He made me sign things I didn't understand, always assuring me it was just protocol. And like a fool, I trusted him. For a while, until I got locked out of my own server access. Until my name was quietly removed from internal memos. Until a junior analyst pulled me aside and whispered, "Ma'am, why are your shares being reallocated?" My hands shook as I flipped through the fine print of the last document I'd signed. Buried deep in legalese, a temporary delegation of operational control to Gerald. In the interest of stability. He didn't steal the company. I gave it to him, and the moment I realized it, I called Grandpa. He didn't answer. Instead, I got a text. Just one line, "Let him burn himself, your time is coming." I wanted to scream. I wanted to undo every signature, every smile I'd nodded through, every dinner I'd sat beside that man and called it tolerance. But most of all I wanted to learn, because if Gerald was playing chess, I had just sacrificed my queen, and the game was far from over. If you've ever been gaslit into believing you weren't ready, only to realize too late that was the plan all along, hit the like button or comment, "I see it now." You're not alone. There's a unique kind of heartbreak in walking through a building with your name on the lease, only to realize you're a guest in every room. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The polite nods from staff who used to greet me by name, the way executive assistants no longer CC'd me on major decisions, the unspoken rule that Gerald sat at the head of the table during strategy calls while I lingered somewhere near the printer. But the real blow came on a Tuesday. I'd asked for the quarterly balance sheet, not the polished summary but the real thing. The raw numbers, line by line. The CFO blinked at me like I'd asked to see their dental record. "I thought Gerald already briefed you," he said carefully. "He did," I replied. "I want to read it for myself." A beat passed, then came the deflection. "Of course, I'll just get that sent over." He never did. I didn't press it. Not immediately. Because deep down I already knew. I was being kept out on purpose. Gerald's shadow moved through the company like cigarette smoke. Thin, sharp, invasive. Every department bent toward him not because they respected him but because they feared what happened when they didn't. I saw it firsthand when an intern in marketing accidentally forwarded me a pitch deck with notes that read, "CEO wants this scrubbed. Too feminine." CEO. He meant me. But he didn't even consider I'd see it. I started staying late. When the last office lights clicked off and the floors were quiet, I wandered. Sat in empty boardrooms, scrolling through internal databases, teaching myself how to read cash flow like a language. I watched training videos on corporate law. Downloaded investor presentations from the past decade. I listened to old voicemails from Grandpa, ones where he talked about pressure reveals truth, and some men only show their teeth when they think no one's looking. I began to understand what Gerald had always been doing. Every time I deferred, he collected a chip. Every document I signed without reading was another inch I handed him. He had quietly appointed himself my handler, and I was the perfect puppet. The underestimated heir, playing dress-up while the real deals got signed behind my back. The cruelest part, he made me feel grateful. "You've got potential, kid," he told me one afternoon, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Just not quite there yet." He used praise like anesthesia, and I'd been numb for too long. That night, I pulled up my grandfather's final will again. Line by line, there it was, clear as day. Ownership is irrevocable, but operational control may be delegated, temporarily. Gerald didn't own the company. He couldn't. I still held 100% of the equity. He had power, but only if I believed he did. The realization didn't bring triumph, it brought fury, and a strange, shivering calm. Because the game wasn't over. It hadn't even started. The next day, I walked into the office wearing flats instead of heels. Pulled my hair into a tight ponytail. No makeup, no performance. I sat in the back of the budget meeting and listened. Really listened. When Gerald made a joke about cutting costs like a woman clips coupons, I didn't flinch. I watched who laughed, who stayed silent, who looked away. I was building a map, a list, a plan. This wasn't just about taking back a title. It was about taking back truth. Because this company may not have been built for me, but I would be damned if I let it be stolen without a fight. If you've ever had to play dumb while sharpening your sword just to survive long enough to strike, leave it in the comments. I see you. I really do. It had been 3 months since Grandpa passed, and this was my first time back. I drove up alone, no assistant, no press, no one from the company, just me and the gravel crunching under the tires like bones. Every room in that house was a museum of his discipline. A place where shoes didn't squeak, where clocks ticked in perfect rhythm, and where failure had no voice. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe closure. Maybe a reason. What I found was neither. The study was the same as I remembered, dark-paneled walls, shelves stuffed with hard covers, and his old cigar humidor sitting on the desk like a sleeping animal. I opened it more out of habit than hope. No cigars, just a flash drive wrapped in a rubber band wedged beneath a false bottom. My throat tightened, my hands shook. I didn't hesitate. Back in my car, I plugged it into the dashboard laptop. One folder. Labeled, "If she wakes up." Inside were documents, hundreds, meticulously organized, evidence, wire transfers between shell companies tied to Gerald, invoices for consulting fees that went nowhere, screenshots of internal memos Gerald had altered before passing them up the chain, and then, videos, security footage from the company's headquarters, late-night meetings, side deals, Gerald making promises he didn't have the authority to keep, promises he knew I wouldn't question. It wasn't just shady business, it was criminal. And Grandpa had known. At the bottom of the folder was a letter, typed, signed, dated 6 weeks before he died. "My dear girl, I knew they would test you. Not with violence, but with whispers, with smiles. That's how real power works. It convinces you to hand yourself over before it ever has to take you." I let Gerald believe he won because pride will always burn faster than paper. But this company is yours by law. And if you're reading this, then you're finally awake. Use what's in here to take it back. But not for revenge. For clarity. You need to see who they are before you decide who you'll become. With all my flawed love? Gee, I stared at the screen so long I forgot where I was. He never once told me he was proud. Never said he loved me outright. But that letter, cold, calculated, sharp, it was the closest thing I'd ever had to his faith, and he'd left it to me like a scalpel. I spent the next week doing nothing but studying that drive. I stayed off the grid, no meetings, no emails, no texts. Gerald messaged me once, "Hope you're well, we're progressing on the Q3 rollout. Take your time getting centered." Centered, as if I was off balance, as if he was the one holding me steady. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Let him stay comfortable. Meanwhile, I brought in Grandpa's old lawyer, Mr. Levins, a man so old school he refused to text. We met in person, in the back of a silent private library surrounded by the scent of dust and legacy. He reviewed everything, confirmed the documents were real, and then said the words I didn't know I needed to hear. "You have every legal right to remove him, right now." But I didn't. Not yet. Because I remembered what Grandpa wrote. Don't do it for revenge. Do it for clarity. So I watched, I waited, and I gathered more. Because it wasn't enough to kick him out. I wanted everyone to see him for what he really was, without me needing to say a word. The collapse had to come from him. Have you ever held a truth so powerful you had to wait for the right moment to let it burn? If so, drop a below because you know that timing is everything. It's amazing what people will reveal when they think you're not watching. I came back to the office with a different kind of silence. Not the defeated kind, the surgical kind. I smiled more, agreed more, Let Gerald believe he'd finally worn me down. "You're glowing," he said one morning, over espresso, slipping his Rolex into view. "Stepping back suits you." I laughed like it was a compliment. He didn't know I had full surveillance logs now. Recordings of every late-night call, every side agreement. Every time he promised shared equity to someone he had no legal right to promise it to. He was unraveling on his own. I just had to give him enough rope. So I gave him what he wanted. Absence. For the next month, I disappeared publicly. I started calling out of board meetings, delegating to trusted advisors, posing for vague Instagram posts in art galleries and cafes. Let the narrative float that I was a rich girl playing CEO, already bored. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I met with the heads of compliance one by one, quietly, in neutral cafes, off the record. They weren't hard to flip. They'd seen the irregularities, the disappearing budgets, the hush-hush hiring of external consultants who never clocked in. They just didn't think anyone would back them. Now, someone was. I reread Grandpa's letter every night, underlined the line that haunted me. Pride burns faster than paper. And it was true. Gerald was growing cocky, flashier. He upgraded his car, flew private to Miami for a leadership conference no one invited him to. Word started circulating that he was modernizing the company vision without board approval. He was baiting his own downfall. I just had to be patient. Then came the perfect opportunity, the IPO. We'd been preparing for it for years, but Gerald decided now was the time to go public, without informing key stakeholders. It was a power move, and a reckless one. I watched him give an interview on Bloomberg, calling himself the strategic force behind the company's next era. They didn't even mention me. Perfect. The day before the IPO, I called an emergency meeting with the full board. No one expected me to show up. I wore a simple black suit. No makeup, no entourage, just me and a thick folder. Gerald was already mid-sentence when I walked in. He froze. I took the head seat, and then I laid out every piece of evidence. Slide by slide. Date by date, video by video. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't gloat. I simply presented, like Grandpa taught me. I ended with a printed copy of the clause from the will, the one stating that any executive proven to have acted against the company's financial or ethical interest would trigger immediate termination. Silence. Then I pulled out one last envelope, sealed. It was a letter from Grandpa, stamped, notarized, dated. Inside was a final instruction. If Gerald has violated any of the attached protocols, he is to be removed immediately and barred from holding any future leadership role within the company. Ownership is not to be transferred. The heir has full discretion. I turned to Gerald. "You built your kingdom on borrowed time," I said, "and you spent all of it pretending I wasn't watching." He opened his mouth, closed it. There were no threats, no lawsuits, just silence, the kind that wraps around a man who finally realizes he bet everything on himself and lost. That night, I walked home in the rain. No umbrella, just headphones in, a playlist Grandpa would have hated, and a peace I hadn't felt since before all of this started. I didn't feel powerful, I felt clear. He hadn't handed me a company, he handed me a crucible. And I'd passed through it, changed. If you've ever had to let someone believe they won, just long enough to watch them fall on their own, drop a check in the comments. You weren't weak, you were strategic. Gerald didn't show up the next day. Not at the office, not in the press. He vanished like a bad idea, quick, bitter, and without apology. The media didn't care about the details, they cared about the scandal. Stepfather CEO ousted amid fraud allegations hit the front page of 3 business dailies. By noon, Family Empire trended on Twitter. Some outlets called me the silent heiress, others painted me as the victim turned viper. I wasn't surprised. People love a woman with a knife so long as she's smiling while she holds it. But behind the headlines, things were messier. My mother left me a voicemail. Just one. "You've embarrassed this family beyond repair. Call me if you ever decide to grow up." I didn't call her back. She knew what Gerald had done. Maybe not the full extent, but enough to know that silence was complicity. She had chosen comfort, and I had chosen fire. A few board members tried to distance themselves, issuing carefully worded statements like, "We regret any oversight that allowed this to happen." I didn't bother correcting them. Let them spin, let them squirm. Because the truth had already been aired. And truth, once unleashed, has no off switch. That weekend I did something wild. I walked into the company's annual charity gala, alone. The same gala where just the year before I'd stood in a corner, name tag crooked, clutching a warm flute of champagne, while Gerald introduced my mother as the woman behind the empire. This time there was no Gerald, just me. And a stage. The MC didn't even know how to introduce me at first. He stammered through "our new rightful CEO" and motioned for applause. The clapping was tentative, awkward, but I didn't flinch. I stepped to the mic and smiled. "Good evening. I wasn't supposed to be up here," I said. "According to most projections, including some of yours, I was supposed to be a footnote, a placeholder, a warm body in a cold seat. But that's the thing about legacy. It doesn't ask for your permission to arrive. It just shows up and waits for you to grow into it." The room got quiet, no phones, no whispers, just listening. I went on, talking not about scandal, but about responsibility. About the burden of inheriting something you didn't ask for, but refusing to let it rot in someone else's hands. And then I ended with this. To anyone who's ever been told to stay quiet, to let things slide, to be smaller so others could feel bigger, I hope my story gives you permission to stop apologizing. The truth will cost you, but it's always worth the price. The applause was different this time. It wasn't polite, it was real. After the gala, a young woman came up to me, early 20s, nervous energy, press badge shaking slightly. "Did you know this was going to happen?" she asked. "That it would all end like this?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and said the only honest thing I could. "No. I just knew I wouldn't let them write the ending." And maybe that's all courage is. Not knowing where the story ends, just refusing to hand someone else the pen. If you've ever reclaimed the narrative of your life, no matter how late, no matter how messy, drop a "ah" in the comments. You earned that pen, now write the ending you deserve. I didn't stay on as CEO, that surprises people. "You had everything," one colleague said. "Why step down now?" But the truth is, I never wanted the throne. I just wanted it to stop being used as a weapon. Once Gerald was gone and the board restructured, I made the move quietly. Appointed a new CEO, someone I trusted, someone who valued vision over vanity, and stepped into a role that fit me better. Founder of the Bennett Initiative. It's a startup incubator named after my grandfather, but not for the man everyone else knew. Not the tycoon, the teacher, the one who left me blueprints disguised as puzzles. Lessons buried in silence, the one who let me fall forward, then handed me the map when I was finally ready to use it. The Bennett Initiative is built for the kids who were never invited to the table. First-gen entrepreneurs, underestimated teens, people like me who had ideas but no gatekeepers. We fund them, mentor them, show them how to read contracts before signing them, show them how to lead without selling their souls. That's the legacy I chose. Not the building, the blueprint. A few months ago, I visited Grandpa's grave. I brought a small plaque with me, just a piece of brushed copper with one word engraved, "Heir." Not of money, of mindset. I placed it near the stone. It glinted in the late morning sun, soft and stubborn, like the man himself. And I spoke out loud, which I'd never done at a grave before. "Thank you for trusting me," I said. Even when I didn't understand the test. A breeze stirred the grass, no ghosts, no thunder, just a quiet knowing stillness. It was enough. As I walked back to the car, my phone buzzed. An email. From a 17-year-old girl in Detroit who had just launched a language app through the initiative. She'd gotten her first investor meeting, she'd signed her first contract. She said she felt like a real founder now. I smiled. That's what it was all for. Not the revenge. Not the headlines. The ripple. Because for every door Gerald slammed, I've now opened 10. And for every time I was told to be smaller, I've helped someone else step into something bigger. If you've made it this far, maybe you're like me. Maybe someone once made you feel invisible, in a room you were born to lead. Maybe your story doesn't look like victory yet. But it will. And when it does, don't forget to turn around and build a bridge for the next person. Because legacy isn't what you take. It's what you leave behind. If this story hit something in you, if you're in the middle of reclaiming what's rightfully yours, I'd love to hear about it. Drop your thoughts below or just say, "I'm still building." And if this reminded you of someone who needs to believe in their own voice again, share it with them. That's how we pass the torch.